Hey, I'm Chase Weber, and I'm an owner at Gnome Recording Studio in Nashville, Tennessee. We get asked a lot, being multi-genre, what drum mic should we use? How do we set these up? How many microphones? And so in part one, we're going to talk about miking techniques and where to start with a basic understanding. In part two, we're going to talk about 4 different setups where we combine these microphones to achieve different tones and feels in a mix. To get part two, click the link in the description below. Enter your email and we'll send it right over. Quick note before we dive in, we're using a Franklin Drum Co. kit with an 80s Ludwig Acrolite, K-Con Crash and Ride, and some Carope hi-hats. Now, let's look at the mics we're using today and how I approach placing them. Okay, so let's start with kick mics. Down here we got an Audix D6 on the kick out, and inside we have a Shure Beta 91A. So the Beta 91A, you're gonna put about in the center, and then push it up and then pull it back about an inch, so it's kind of sitting in the middle of the drum. And the D6, and for all kick mics honestly, there's usually a ring about the middle, and I line that ring up with the cutout in the head. Now sometimes, if I want to sound a little poppier, I'll change from this setup. This is a good starting point. So I'll angle it in a little more and that scoops the mids. Or if I want that big country Christian bloom that's been going on, I'll pull it back a little bit so more air hits the front of the microphone. But this is a good starting point for a worship drum kit sound. Onto the snare. We're using a SM57, classic mic on snare, can't go wrong with that. I usually start where it's positioned now. So it's about a fistish away, maybe a few inches, and I start right in between. Here's the middle, here's the side, right there. This is a great balanced place to start with your snare. Now sometimes I'll open it up, gives a little more open sound. If I'm aiming more towards here, also gets a little more of the kit. Sometimes I put on the edge and that will add a little more transient. But really I love starting here because it allows the drummer to really shape the snare tone to the way they want. And once they have their signature sound, then we are able to help make it fit in a mix by doing these small adjustments. For the snare bottom mic, you can kind of see where I have it placed right now. It's also about a fist off, and I try to keep the same angle as the top snare on the bottom snare. Now I like miking the head because it gives a really full body tone, but I still get the brightness the snare bottom adds. But there are times you want more crack, and for that, a lot of country guys will aim it straight up right in the edge, and if this isn't enough, you can even rotate it so the snares are right there as well. And that'll give that really good smacky snare sound that you hear on a lot of music. There are times that you would mic the side of the shell. That's a third mic. It's not always needed. It's really great for indie, and it's great to add this kind of like airy whoosh to the sound. Again, not always needed, but it's fun if you have the extra channels. Onto the toms. So I start with toms a lot like the snare. I do about a fist off, same distance from this, and this works for a lot of occasions. It really shows what tone the tom is having. But what's really important in toms is that we want the least amount of cymbal bleed in them so they can really pop out in a mix. So a lot of times, yeah, I'm starting here, but I'll have to angle them a little bit like that. I even have some friends who they put them as close to the tom as possible. And this does do a little bit of a mid scoop, and it gets rid of the bleed, which makes them really pop out in a mix. So for here we're using Beyer M201s, and I love these mics because they have a lot of punch. They scoop a lot of the mids, and that's really great to make the punchy tom sound we all love. But that really, it matters, but it doesn't matter. When it comes down to toms, it's all about tuning, it's all about matching transients and sounds, and we can do that with tape. So I love miking really close to the tape to really enhance what the drummer has made, because it's not just tone, it's tape, it's dampening, it's a whole thing, it's a system the drums are, and so we're just trying to capture that and enhance that in the mix. This mic is a 451, and it's a mic I love on the hi-hat. It's a bright mic, and it's great at capturing the energy done by a hi-hat. I start usually to the angle to the side a little way because I want less bleed of the kit. And I start, a little more than a fist off, and there's only a couple things I try to do in the hi-hat mic. I don't want to be parallel. If I'm exactly parallel, I'd add some weird standing waves, and I still like the sound of it. There are times I will open it up if a drummer is hitting over here a lot, I want to capture that. But it does come with a cost, and that cost is I'm going to pick up a lot of crashes, a lot of ride, a lot of the whole kit. And for me, that's no good. The hi-hat mic for me is a spot mic. So I really like it over here, and it's just something I blend up into a mix every once in a while when I see the drummer is on stage doing cool hi-hat things. And that requires you to look. You have to look up and see, oh, right now it's appropriate. We're going to turn that microphone up. But overall, I don't just leave it up because I capture my kit sound with my overheads. There are other mic options. There are dynamic mics. SM7s are used a lot, and I really debated on using an SM7 for this video. But I felt the 451 really showcased the brightness that's needed for modern pop sounding hi-hats. There's a lot of history with overheads. As you can see here, we got 3 microphones. There's a spaced pair of AKG 414s, and in the middle, we have a Sony C38. And the reason I have all 3 set up, besides the fact that it's a common thing to do in the studio to get different blends inside your production, is that I want to show the importance of a microphone inside your mix. So, space pair, yeah, we're kind of far away right now, and they could be lower or higher or whatever, but overheads, for me, are about showing the entire kit. And that's really important as a drummer. As a drummer, if you focus your in-ear mix to be more overhead than shells, you'll be able to play more evenly, more consistently, and you actually will gain the trust of your front of house and broadcast engineer so that they're able to push you more, to leave your overheads up because they know in quiet moments you're going to be playing at the right level, and in loud moments you're not going to be overbearing. Now, how do you get to the heights? How do you know how high to put these microphones? How do you know how it's going to sound and how it's going to change things? So for me, I start like this. I do middle of the snare, 3 sticks to my space pair. This middle mic is 3 sticks to it as well. You can go lower, you can go higher, you can go to the sides, you can do whatever you need to do. For me, it's about getting the whole kit. But for a lot of people, if your room, if it's just too bright, maybe you just need a little clarity in your cymbals. So you need to get closer so you can really hear and differentiate the ride and gel it together with the rest of the instruments. And that's great, that's not a problem. But what does matter is that we're in phase. So other people, they say, maybe we should do it at the center of the snare. Maybe we should get them all the same from this. Maybe we should make sure all the mics are the same distance from the drummer's ears himself. And again, that's fine, but phase is what matters. We need to keep everything in phase so everything is as punchy and transient as it is inside this room at the original kit, so it conveys to everyone else this sound. Room mics are an often overlooked mic. And yeah, a lot of places don't have them, or they might think they don't need them. But for recorded audio, room mics are really important. So these are a pair, and here we have a pair of Coles 4038s, really classic room mic. They're ribbons, they're really smooth. They take high end and EQ really well. But really what we're looking for with them is depth. You add depth and space to your kit in a recording, in the studio, or live even. Adding room mics really helps add a deepness to your kit. Almost a bottom, a noise floor, if you will, and some sort of nostalgia. And room mics are important historically because back in the day, that's what you had. That's what you started with. Drums were room mics and you blended in close mics to taste. So you'd be like, oh, the kick's a little weak. So let's add a little kick into this room mic. But it wasn't how it is now. And now, yeah, we push shells more. We start with all your close mics and you add in a little overhead. You add in a little bit of room. But for historic sound, for depth, for atmosphere, for making people feel like they're inside the room, if you have the extra channels, room mics are still important today. Now that we covered what mics will be used and how you can change their sound via placement, in part 2 we're going to combine those mics in 4 different ways, from a 3 mic setup to a 12 to really show how that affects the mix. To get part 2, click the link in the description below, enter your email and we'll send it right over. I'll see you there.